So on these Confucius Institutes, which are sort of attached to universities, funded by the Chinese state, these are for English students, or I should say British students, to go to learn Mandarin. It's not vice versa.
No, they are basically, they exist in many countries around the world, but the ones in the UK are basically for British students at universities and also some external students in the sense of, part-time older people in, their 60s and plus who are doing kind of evening classes to learn Mandarin. From what we know about the ones operating in the UK, all they do is basically teach quite basic Mandarin. So if people want to close them down, the argument would be that essentially anything linked to the PRC, the People's Republic of China, is the problem. I don't think anyone has actually suggested there's anything happening in the content of the teaching in these institutes that is, getting people into Xi Jinping's thought or brainwashing them in that sense. It is language schools. So the question is one of principle about whether you should have Chinese-linked money helping people to learn Mandarin. And as I've said, if you say the answer is no, then the flip side of the question is, well, where does the funding come from elsewhere to keep that vital skill in the UK skill set?
Now, for Liz Truss's part, we've heard a bit about Magnitsky-style sanctions on people involved in the Hong Kong crackdown. We've heard about some potential trade blockages when it comes to regions of China that have been engaged in human rights abuses. That's all happened in the past. Have we heard anything new from Liz Truss when it comes to policy on China?
Well, there seems to be a bit of a split in terms of what's being proposed and what's actually happening with the Foreign Office, which, of course, as Foreign Secretary, she's in charge of at the moment. There is a lot more language about speaking firmly to China. And one of the things that she wants to do that Rishi Sunak has not advocated is shutting down the current proposals for an economic dialogue with China. So essentially, that's quite interesting for a former trade secretary to say that actually, second biggest economy in the world, we're not going to be talking to them about new economic possibilities. That's, direction of travel for global Britain, question of how practical that is with the world's second biggest economy. But, it's a clear position. But again, I come back to this question of capacity. One of the things that the Foreign Office has done recently in its budget cuts is to cut an institution, small, low-key, called the Great Britain China Centre. It's been running since 1974, nearly 50 years, provides commercial assistance to British companies in terms of training them about China. It's also done some good work on human rights, rule of law, in trying to push China towards a more liberal view on those. But a recent cut, Foreign Office funding has said, we're not going to pay for this anymore. So it comes to the question, a bit like my Mandarin training point, that if the UK wants to get serious about China, but is currently cutting all the capacity to actually learn about the place or to advise on the place, it suggests that there's a lot of language, but not necessarily the policy that will enable that to actually happen in practice.
Yes, that's a really, really interesting point. I suppose there's a question of, do we put our fingers in our ears and just pretend China doesn't exist? Or how do you manage this growing power and I suppose engage with it at least on a diplomatic level, if not on a friendly level? Well, Professor Rana Mitter, thank you so much for joining us.